Hello, I'm Shanda Fulbright here for Cross-Examine. Everybody has an opinion about who Jesus is. A good man, a wise teacher, a fictional character mentioned in an old book. But who's right? Who's wrong? And why does it matter? In Matthew 16, Jesus asked his disciples two questions. Who do men say that I am? Who do you say that I am? First thing we should take note of is that Jesus asked questions as a teaching technique because questions reveal what you know and what you don't. They get to the heart of the issue. The odd thing about these questions is that everyone has an answer to them, even you. The first question, who do men say that I am, is a question about the culture and popular opinion. In the first century, the word on the street was that Jesus was John the Baptist or Elijah or one of the prophets. And although people had differing opinions about who Jesus was, it's clear they thought he was someone special, a spokesman for God, a miracle worker, but not God. The culture of that time put Jesus into categories of thought that already existed rather than allowing Christ to redefine their categories by his identity. So what's the word on the street about Jesus today in the 21st century? It might surprise you to hear that Jesus is mentioned by most religious groups. Why is that odd? Because every movement mentions him and tries to make sense of who he is and his teaching. In fact, you will hear about Jesus from the Jewish religion, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, New Age, and many others. They all say Jesus was a good teacher, a prophet, a miracle worker, born of a virgin, holy, enlightened, a God. But the God, let's not get carried away. In other words, the 21st century culture is doing what the first century culture did, putting Jesus into categories of thought that already exist. Some things never change. And just like the first century culture, all of these religions attest to the fact that Jesus was at least someone special. So why is it important to answer the universal question, who do men say that I am? For the same reason it was important when Jesus asked his disciples the question in the first century, because it affects the second question, who do you say that I am? Will what others say about Christ affect your belief in him? Peter was the first to answer this question, and he said, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." The word Messiah sets Peter's confession apart from the first century culture. Messiah means chosen or anointed one, and in the Greek, it's Christos, which is Christ in English. Peter didn't just put Jesus into the same categories of thought as everyone else. He understood that Jesus was God, and as God, there is no familiar explanation for the one completely set apart from ordinary men. That might leave one asking, so who's right? And how do you know? I mean, we have many differing opinions about who Jesus is, and they can't all be right. Basic logic makes this easy. The law of excluded middle says Jesus is either the Messiah or he's not. The law of non-contradiction says Jesus cannot be both the Messiah and not the Messiah. And the law of identity says Jesus is who he is. But is that the Messiah or John the Baptist or Elijah? Because the answer can't be all three. Somebody's wrong. In fact, a lot of buddies are wrong because only one can be right. What Jesus says at the end of the questioning is important. He said, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." The good news is that Peter didn't listen to the popular opinions of the culture. He knew what the word on the street about Jesus was, but he examined the evidence for himself. Jesus equated Peter's confession to divine revelation. In other words, the source of Peter's confession was the truth revealed to him by God. Jesus performed miracles to confirm who he was. And he said, if you don't believe my words when I tell you that I'm God, at least believe the miracles because they testify of me. Remember those familiar categories of thought the people of the first century and even the religions of today try and put Jesus in? The miracles he performed broke the mold on the familiar and authenticated who he claimed to be. You see, everyone has a source for the answer to the question, who do you say that I am? Peter's source could have been the rest of the culture, popular opinion, and familiar explanations, but Peter went beyond the opinion of culture and looked at the evidence that pointed to Jesus' identity. When it comes down to it, there will always be two questions. Who do men say that Jesus is? Who do you say that Jesus is? Will what the culture says about Jesus affect what you believe about him? Or will you examine the evidence and ask God to reveal who he is? I go into depth on the laws of logic in our brand new course for middle schoolers, Train Your Brain and Introduction to Logic. You can sign up at onlinechristiancourses.com. For more from me, follow me at Shanda Fulbright and listen to my podcast, Her Faith Inspires Podcast, anywhere podcasts are found.